I'm a 23-year-old pilot, and I'm also homeless. People have this idea that because you're a pilot, you have lots of money and you stay in nice hotels and you travel all over the place. But in reality, that's not the case for the first few years you're flying.
So you had mentioned to me earlier that you haven't really lived anywhere for the past several years.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember the last time I was actually living somewhere for more than 2 months. When I was in Alaska, I was there from July until the end of September. That was the longest place I've lived, and even that, I was essentially living in a cardboard box. I was living in a shed.
Oh my God!
It was a shed. It was about 10 by 8 foot shed with a loft, and I had my bed up in the loft, and I had outside underneath the tarp, held up by 2x4s, was a kitchen which had a stove and a sink, and then a shower in there.
So it had the essentials.
It had the essentials, and then I had an outhouse that I walked out into the woods, and it was a 3-sided thing facing out in the forest. And I would bring my knife with me to go. There's bears and moose out there. Not that they would do anything, but it just made me feel better.
Yeah, sure.
Honestly, the worst part was the mosquitoes, where I would have a stripe right here where I couldn't cover with my pants and my shirt that I'd get eaten with mosquitoes.
I've heard the mosquitoes are absolutely terrible.
They're the Alaska state bird is the mosquito.
Oh my God. Since September, October, I was flying for a survey company, and I was flying, they gave me an Aztec, and I flew around the country. I was working 7 days a week. Every day the weather was good. I hadn't gone home. I had 1 week off that I went home in that 6 months, and the rest of the time I was put in hotels, and sometimes I got a rental car, sometimes I didn't. Sure.
Uber sometimes. My company paid for it all, so it was a great way to explore the country and have my company pay for everything. It was pretty rough living in hotels out of a suitcase, living out of a plane.
Sure.
For 6 months. But I got to see a lot, and I was also given this airplane to be able to just fly like it was mine, and so that was a lot of fun. But during that, I was in Texas at the time. I had a rental car that had Colorado plates, and I'm from California, so I had my California ID.
Right.
And I got pulled over by a cop, and I was speeding. He looks at my ID, he's like, "So is this your current address?" And I was like, "Not really." And he's like, "So is this your car?" I'm like, "No, it's a rental car. It's got Colorado plates and stuff." And he's like, "Okay, so what's the best mailing address? Where do you live now?" I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty much homeless." And he's like, "Okay, so what do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I travel for work." And I told him what I do, that I travel, and I'm never anywhere for very long. And he was like, "Well, where are you coming from?" And I was like, "Well, I'm coming from New Mexico." And he's like, "Well, okay, where are you going to be tomorrow?" And I was like, "Well, I'm going to be in Utah tomorrow." And so he's like, "So you got a California ID with the Colorado plates, you're in Texas, you were in New Mexico yesterday, and you're going to Utah tomorrow. Where are you going to be in a week? Where can I send you a ticket?"
Right.
And I was like, "Honestly, I could be in New York. I have no idea."
Oh my gosh.
He's like, "Well, how do you get sent mail?" And I was like, "Well, nobody sends me mail, and if they do, it's my company, and they overnight it that day, the morning of. And sometimes I get it, and sometimes I have to fly back there a week later and pick it up."
That's crazy.
And so it was rough, but it was kind of cool. It was also like, I'd get a text 8 o'clock that morning or 7 o'clock, however it was, saying, "Hey, you need to be in wherever." And I would fly 8 hours, wherever it was, to go to the new spot and find a hotel, find a car if I could, all within budget, and find a hangar. The hangar was the hardest part, finding an airport that had available hangar, and then getting from the hangar to wherever it needed, because it needed to be hangared every night. It was tough. You just figure all that out on the spot, and then you kind of get used to it and you figure it out. Sometimes you spend the night in the FBO, and that's the way it is.
Right.
It was great actually, because I didn't pay rent. I haven't paid rent somewhere since Alaska. I paid, but before that I didn't pay for another few months. I have rarely paid rent anywhere or anything. So, in my trucks, I weren't home. So I non-opt my trucks, and I wasn't flying my own plane. So I took the insurance off of it and just put it to ground insurance. And so my bills were minimal, and my company was paying for my living situation, my hotels and cars and stuff. So I could just pay for food and keep my phone going, and that was about it. And it was nice. And that's the thing with a lot of my jobs after I got my CFI and I started flying and stuff, was I'm not getting paid shit.
Right.
But I am enjoying this crap
You're
out
enjoying
of my
life,
flying.
and that's awesome.
Yeah, and the banner towing stuff and the Alaska stuff and my last survey stuff, I wasn't getting paid much, but I was getting that experience that I loved.
Yeah.
And there's different ways of going through aviation and getting your licenses, and most people go the CFI route. They do their 1,500 hours of CFI at the same airport and just hammer it out, and they go to airlines. And that's great, and that's more power to them, but I've taken 6 years. I've taken a lot longer than most people have.
Sure.
But I've enjoyed every moment of it. Even eating top ramen and dino nuggets in my shed in Alaska.
Tell me a little bit about what you're doing here and why you ended up here.
So my goal all along has been, I grew up in California with all the fires there and everything. I'd always see these planes going over the top, and I was like, this looks so cool. And the fact that I could go, instead of getting in trouble for diving through canyons, I can get paid to do it and be appreciated for it. And so that was my goal, was to become a fire tanker pilot. And I don't really have much of an interest for the big planes. I like the little Porsches and dive through canyons.
Right.
So that always interested me, but it was really hard to get into. And it took me about 3 years to figure out how to actually get into it.
Sure.
And while I was doing my survey stuff, I was just making phone calls, making contacts, and I happened to be about an hour away from, there's a turbine training center in Kansas. And I was about an hour away from it when I called them up and realized that they're that close. So I get to choose my bases when I was doing my survey. I get to figure out what airport I want to fly out of.
Sure.
And so I went and decided to base out of there. And he said he had about 5 minutes to talk, and I was willing to take 5 minutes. We ended up having a beer and talked for 2 hours.
That's how it goes. When you click with somebody, and especially in the same interest group, you tend to continue talking, and leads to great opportunities.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what happened this time. And we ended up talking, and so he's got a whole sim set up for the 802, which is the plane that you use for they're called seats, single engine air tankers, and for the fire stuff. And so I was talking to him about who do I talk to about getting into this, what's the route to do. And he set me up with somebody else who's down in Alabama who has an 802 that's a dual seat, which there's very, very few in the world that I even know of, let alone the U.S. that have 2 seats. That's one of these planes out here, the similar deal. And so he set me up with him. I started to talk with him a little bit, and ended up where if the other guy could get me a job somewhere, I would come back and take his sim course. And so that's what I did. Is I got a call about a month ago, right after my survey stuff ended, and he said, hey, I might have a potential job for you. And so I called up my boss now, Jake, and I said, here's the deal, this is what I want to do, is this something I can do for you?
Right.
And I talked to him on the phone, and a day later, or actually I think it was 2 days later, I hopped on a flight I was in San Diego at the time, and I flew out to Missouri, middle of nowhere. I've never been out here before, and didn't even know where I was going actually when I got to St. Louis. He said, fly into St. Louis and I'll pick you up. And so he picked me up, and I saw this, and all it took was for him to open the hangars on this
at the airport and show me the ag cat. And I fell in love.
That's awesome.
This turbine biplane that just took up the entire hangar. And I'm like, what are all these dings and dents in the wing? He's like, no, that's from hitting trees. And I was like, oh, this is awesome.
That's perfect.
And that's where he sold me. And so he's like, well, now that you like it, I got to make sure that I like you, and I want to put you in this airplane. And so we went and flew the Champ, which actually sounds like it's
Yeah, he's
right now.
calling up right now, yeah.
So he put me in the Champ, and we went out and flew around for about 20 minutes, and he's like, I already know that I want to hire you, and as long as you're willing to commit. The biggest thing is the commitment with his job. He wants 5 years out of me.
Okay.
So 5 summers, I got to be here. He's putting a lot of money into me and a lot of faith.
Sure.
The problem with this airplane is it's a one-seater. I have 0 turbine time. I have 0 ag time. I've got a bunch of low-level stuff from the backcountry in Alaska and that kind of thing, but
Sure.
I don't have anything that quantifies that for insurance. So insurance actually won't cover me in this airplane. So the first time I ever go fly this airplane,
That's terrifying.
it's an expensive airplane.
Yeah.
And there's no one else at the controls. It's
Right.
single. I'm the only one in it. He can talk me through on the radio.
Right.
But I'm gonna go fly it, and if I crash it, he's shit out of luck. I mean, with this job too, you're going under power lines and underneath telephone wires and everything else, and your wing, then you lose sight of the power lines.
Right.
And you're like, well, I hope I'm still low enough.
Right.
But yeah, that's where he got me on the job. Is as soon as he opened up the hangar, I was like, this is what I want to do.